Hey guys, Zane here with another One Take review, and today I wanted to talk about Earthling by David Bowie. Earthling is, to me, a very interesting album, as of course David Bowie is a widely respected man who is known for his artistic constant reinvention and never really staying the same character or the same musician for more than a few albums. Perhaps no other artist or individual in rock music has brought as many new sounds to his own sound as David Bowie had over the course of his life. I mean, the man went from teen pop to psychedelic to piano rock to singer-songwriter kind of stuff that goes with that piano rock to early electronic to progressive rock to etc, etc, etc. David Bowie just did not know what sound he wanted to be, and he was all the better for it. Somehow, even in Bowie's very large discography filled with a number of incredibly musically versatile records, Earthling still manages to stand out. In fact, I would argue out of all post-80s but pre-Black Star David Bowie works, Earthling is one of the albums that deserves the most retrospective acclaim that it really doesn't get. The most obvious way that Earthling stands out is in the actual compositions found within the record itself. Before the recording sessions for this album took place, David Bowie had toured with industrial icons and legends Nine Inch Nails, which obviously rubbed off on him to some extent. Earthling is noisy, aggressive, and at times downright paranoid with its rough electronic and industrial influences that very obviously were inspired by early Nine Inch Nails albums like Pretty Hate Machine and The Downward Spiral. I think I, like most other people that were probably alive when this record came out, just didn't know how to feel about that at first. I mean, David Bowie had picked up so many different influences over the years, what's another one? But at the same time, Bowie doing something similar to what bands like Nine Inch Nails and Skinny Puppy were doing just doesn't seem right on paper. However, songs like 7 Years in Tibet and I'm Afraid of Americans completely prove me and any other doubters wrong, as they are some of the best songs that David Bowie released in the period of the late 90s that he was still making music that just wasn't very well received by both fans and critics. While Bowie had, again, obviously experimented with a number of different sounds by this point in his career, the industrial style that he adopts on Earthling doesn't seem like it should work at first, but ultimately it actually works out very well, even if not every single moment lands, which is to be expected. Songs like The Last Thing You Should Do don't really leave any impression, but at the same time there's a level of admiration that you have to have for David Bowie for even doing it in the first place. I mean, a man that many people at the time had considered to artistically peaked in the mid to late 70s, doing industrial and drum and bass related sounds in the late 90s to catch up with the modern times, doesn't seem like something that should even remotely work or make sense in any way, but it does, and it works, and there's a level of respect that you have to have for it, even if you don't enjoy it. Of course, there are a number of tracks on Earthling that are lighter than your typical industrial, and those are those aforementioned drum and bass related tracks that I just mentioned. These tracks include songs like Dead Man Walking and Little Wonder, a fan favorite among the Bowie fan base, and while they are generally less aggressive, they still do have a violent danceability about them that suits the album and its overall attempt at a very more aggressive sound. I would even argue that some of the most successful songs spawned from Earthling are more related to drum and bass than they are industrial. I don't mean to dismiss the industrial sounds that David Bowie picked up on Earthling, obviously they are great, but at the same time I feel like drum and bass as a subgenre does allow David Bowie to combine his previously established 80s, kind of more mainstream, commercially applicable, lighter, and generally a little more light-hearted sound with a more electronic sound as well, to create something that almost is more him meshing his previously established style from the prior decade with a more modernized style for the time, whereas industrial is a complete entire just turn for him totally. Both are effective, don't get me wrong, but I do think that some of Bowie's best work really comes from the drum and bass genre, or his best 90s work at least. As far as the production on Earthling goes, it's quite strong, as David Bowie himself did the vast majority of the production. However, Bowie was also joined by Mark Platy, as well as Tim Machine bandmate and future member of The Cure, Reeves Gabrels. The sharp and powerful production put to songs like Telling Lies results in a very necessary thing, as it does create a very intense and very personal atmosphere that Earthling really needs to achieve what it wants to achieve. There's also the importance of Zachary Alford, the man who created all of the drum loops and performed all forms of percussion on Earthling. Being an electronic album at heart, drum loops are an incredibly important thing that can define and make or break an album like Earthling, but thankfully, Alford does deliver some excellent drum loops that create a mysterious atmosphere that is able to draw you in and keep your attention directed only at the album. Bowie's vocals on Earthling are quite good as well, but then again, it seems to me that even on his 21st Century releases all the way up to Black Star, his voice never really aged, or at least not terribly. This album, which came out in 1997, really does sound kind of fresh by David Bowie standards, at least his vocals at least, which easily could match up with anything released earlier in his catalog. However, more often than not, Bowie takes a very calm approach to his vocal delivery on Earthling, which is pretty unexpected considering the industrial and drum and bass influences and roots that the record has. However, the laid-back and even at times lazy-sounding vocal delivery of Bowie is pretty effective overall, as it does combat the very aggressive and intense instrumentals, especially those on the industrial side of Earthling. If anything, Bowie's often laid-back performance on an otherwise not at all laid-back album is just another factor of Earthling that really shouldn't work as well as it does in the end. So, overall, Earthling manages to be a standout release in one of music's most standout discographies. While there are some flaws here and some tracks that just don't work as well as others, as you may expect from such a major transition in sound, Bowie's work within the realms of industrial and drum and bass music works out shockingly well. So, is this David Bowie's masterpiece? God, no. There's like maybe 10 albums that I would consider for that title before I ever gave it to Earthling, of all things. But is this maybe his best 90s album and one of his most immediately interesting and unpredictable? Why, yes, absolutely it is, which is why I'm going to give Earthling 4 stars out of 5. I think it's just a very intriguing record that, again, sounds a lot better than it actually should. It works with influences that seem very un-Bowie, or at least un-Bowie for the time period in 1997, but again, everything just ends up going perfectly and according to plan, or maybe even better than according to plan. Maybe according to plan seemed like it should have been a lot worse than it was supposed to be. But my point is, Earthling, 4 stars out of 5, and with that being said, that's the end of this review, and I'll see you guys in the next one.